Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I've found in my travels. Today, I don't want to talk about a specific book that I read, but rather I want to do the usual wrap-up and TBR for both December, January, and also doing a TBR for 2025 as a whole. In terms of what I read in December was pretty light. I only read like 5 or 6 things, which is usually how it goes, especially because I get in vacation mode from work during this time, and I'm not really interested in, reading anything, or really watching anything as well. Kind of just loafing around, not having to do anything, which feels pretty good. I definitely recommend that if you can. And so, I didn't get to most of the stuff I wanted to in December. However, I did end up creating another best of list, which you can go check out on my pretty recent videos, at least at the time that I'm saying this. Pretty happy with the list that I created, although I do realize I didn't include Carrier Wave on that list. I wrote it down, but I guess I glossed over it, and I would say that it belongs on the list, but I would say the issue is that I guess the ending was pretty weird, but I do think it does have a place on that list, not in the honorable mentions, but I would switch something out. I don't quite know what that is, but I do think Carrier Wave by Robert Brockway is something that should be reflective of the things that I definitely enjoyed for this year. So that's just something that I would change. And then as for what I want to read for January and 2025 as a whole, I have a lot of things planned. I have 15 books planned on my 2025 TBR. So that's something to look forward to. As for like last year, I'll talk more about this in the when I get there, but I did have a lot of books planned for 2024, and I think I got to them as well. So that sounds pretty groovy. But without further ado, let's do the wrap up and TBR for both January and 2025, and then we'll move on from there. So what did I read in December? It wasn't much in terms of books. I read Ghostopolis by Doug TenNapel, which I think I've read other things from him. I thought it was okay. I thought the story didn't fully use all the elements that it's set up, especially because the main character is kind of dying, but also not really. And given that the character visits the underworld, or visits the afterlife or whatnot, you think there would be, more to do with that sort of plot thread. And I don't think Doug managed to sort of follow it up, but it was still an interesting and very well animated kind of story because it was a graphic novel. I also read Monster by Urasawa, something like that. I thought it was rad. I definitely want to read volume 2. I want to see where the story goes from there. Definitely a lot of thoughts about like saving lives versus taking lives and your responsibility and whatnot. And the sort of unfeeling murderer that exists in this in the story. It's really cool. I'm not quite sure why they used Germany as a backdrop. This is like the second sort of manga series that has used Cold War Germany as a backdrop, and I don't get why Japan or writers from Japan seem to be doing that, but it's still really cool, and I definitely recommend Monster. And then I also read The Sea and You, which I thought was okay. Another thing that another sort of story that I don't think fully uses all the elements that are available to it, but it's still pretty okay. It's a very touching story, I think. And then I also read Forrest Gump, which I thought was awful. The author seems to dislike people with intellectual disabilities, which doesn't sit well with me. It sort of makes it out to be a joke, whereas in the movie that was adapted from it, Forrest, Forrest is still seen as capable, despite his mental sort of despite his deficits, I would say, his intellectual disability. And what's funny is whereas the book kind of makes fun of people with like disabilities in that way, the book or the movie seems to make fun of America at large. It doesn't seem like the director really cared for American history all that much, and so it comes off as a bit pessimistic in its view of the world, but Americans as at large. But the book is terrible. It just speeds through various stuff. It doesn't really give you time to think about who Forrest is or who the people around him are. And I really wonder why they adapted that into a movie. Like it's a great movie, but at the same time, like if you saw the book, what would inspire you to tell a deep and complex story that was in the movie? I'm glad they ended up doing that, but I just wonder where that inspiration came from, because the book and the movie are two different things. I also read a number of short stories, including How Christmas Came to the Santa Maria Flats, which was fun. The Other Wise Man, which I thought was pretty good. Very touching story there about exploring meaning and your connection to some sort of holy figure and a desire to bring truth to the world. And then The Discourager of Hesitancy, which was also okay. Some pretty okay short stories overall. And then I read a number of poems, only a couple, which were mostly Christmas themed. One about heartbreak, which was just something that I've been dealing with and exploring in my own life. It's a bunch of interesting poems. Check out my Poetry Thursday playlist for more information about that. But now we reached the point where I can talk about my TBR. And so first I want to talk about the 2025 TBR. I got to many books on my list from last year, actually. I think there were one or two that I didn't get to, and most were pretty good. Some were kind of bad. I think about Lush in particular, which it was a pretty good good young adult book. It had been on a Newbery, or actually it had been a banned book, and I can see why it was kind of banned, but at the same time, the ending left a lot to be desired. I feel like the author had a very heavy point to make, and they kind of just sort of smoothed it over at the end, kind of taking a complex issue and breaking it down into something maybe too small in that way. And it's probably because it was aimed at young adults, but again, if you break it down and if you make it simple like that, then you run the risk of sort of making it too simple, oversimplifying, and undermining the sort of discussion that needs to be had around such topics. But again, maybe I'm just saying that because, I'm no longer a teenager and I want some more complex things. And there are probably those kind of complex things out there that I should have been seeking out instead. But I do think it's important to read banned books as well as young adult fiction just to be clear and understand what is being said to young adults. That's one of the bad, but there were other pretty good things on the list, including War and Peace, which I thought was phenomenal. So I experienced quite a bit in this last year, but I do have a number of books planned, and I sort of divided them into categories of what types of books, what type of material that I really wanted to get to, and so. I do have two classics on here, Pride and Prejudice, which I'm going to hope to get to in February because it's about love, and it's about more than that, actually, but I do want to sort of make it a theme for February. And then I also want to read If Beale Street Could Talk by James Baldwin, which is a book that I've heard about before and wanted to get to, but also it's an author that I've wanted to get to because I've heard quite a few things about James Baldwin. So be on the lookout for those things. And then I also have two Newbery nominees as well that I want to get to. Walk Two Moons by Sharon Creech and After Tupac and Dee Foster by Jacqueline Woodson. They were either nominees or Newbery winners. I'm always interested in seeing what those books have to say. Again, those are probably aimed at young adults, and that's what the Newbery does. But I've had a good time with a couple of Newbery winners, so this one should probably, these should be pretty solid, or should at least get me hankering for something more complex, and I can look into those types of stories as well. And then I also have 3 comics planned, or graphic novels, including Black Hole by Charles Burns, The Arrival by Sean Tan, and Road to Perdition, which is a movie as well. But I've always heard about this comic and how it was pretty high quality, and I do think I'm or not falling in love, but kind of developing a taste for noir or neo-noir. So very much looking forward to reading that. I also have 15 books on this in total. I don't think I mentioned that, but I have 3 that are banned books that I've managed to learn about. Genderqueer by Maya Kababi, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. That's a book that I've heard that's been banned quite a bit, especially in this recent sort of book banning scare that's been going on. I am very much looking forward to reading what a lot of parents say is awful for children, but it's probably not awful for children. It just presents different ideas that scare parents who think that they need to control their kids. Also Kite Runner by Khaled Hosseini, which I had heard about, and that was actually one of the books that I saw when I was a youth at my library. I was always intrigued by the title and the cover of it, but I never sought it out, but here's my chance to change that. And then Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston, which is another banned book, as I mentioned before. I think I read Zora Neale Hurston in other areas, so I'm looking forward to seeing what she has to say for books in general. In general, I do need to read more Black authors, because that seems to be something that I'm greatly lacking here. I also need to improve my my reading of nonfiction, because that is a huge gap. And so one of the places I'm starting is Into the Wild by John Krakauer, another book that's been turned into a movie about someone sort of going to Alaska, just hitting the road. That should be pretty fun. Wave by Sonali Darren-Yagala, which is about the 2004 Christmas tsunami that hit Indonesia, that general region. Looking forward to that. And A Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawking, which is something I've always wanted to get to but haven't had the time for. It should be pretty confusing and bizarre, and I'm really looking forward to it. And then 2 books, the 2 remaining books on this list are by authors that I've been wanting to return to for a while, but haven't made time for them. One of them is Parable of the Talents by Octavia Butler. I had read Parable of the Sower before, and it was actually on my TBR, or sorry, not my TBR, but my sort of best of list for 2023, I believe. And this is the sequel, and I do think it should be pretty fascinating. Again, Octavia Butler, a Black author, very competent woman author. I read Kindred and Parable of the Sower by her, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing more of what she can offer. And then another one is Sphere by Michael Crichton, which is, it's another Michael Crichton book. I do think Michael Crichton can be sometimes up his own ass, and in his older age, he did become very pessimistic and combative, especially around important issues like climate change. But I still like him as an author, because he's willing to be wrong. He's willing to make guesses. He's willing to sort of take science fiction in interesting directions. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he said in Sphere, which I know is a somewhat popular movie, and maybe it's also a decent book. We'll figure that out. So that was the 2025 TBR. Now, what do I intend to read for January? There's still quite a few books that I need to get to. I'm into progress with That Night in the Library, which is a book that I got from Toronto. So that I should be finished with that pretty soon. Walk Two Moons, which is on my 2025 TBR. So I'm probably going to get to that first. A bunch of books from the library. I want to get to Berserk Volume 16, and I want to get to Death Note Volume 3, which was on the list for December. But of course, I didn't make it to everything in December. So those are just what I have as a preliminary sort of thing. And then for short stories, I want to get to short stories by Dorothy Parker and Thomas Page, people I haven't read before, but I'm very much looking forward to seeing what they say in the short fiction format. And then finally, I have a number of poems planned. Some of them might be Christmas themed or winter themed or winter holiday themed, and that is because I did not get to every single poem that I had picked out for 2020 or not for 2024, obviously, but also for Christmas, for the holidays. And I don't think that would have been possible anyways, because I picked far more than I had time for. So I think it's just a case that I would have had to get to them anyways. So, I'll be reading Christmas themed poems in January, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Keep that festive spirit all throughout the year, hopefully. Anyway, those are my thoughts on what I read in December, as well as what I plan to read in January and 2025 as a whole. I especially believe that it's important to read banned books in 2025 because of who is becoming president yet again. And when, conservatives are in charge, they typically try to ban books because that's all they know how to do all they know is how to make life miserable for everyone else, because they themselves are miserable people. Don't listen to whatever they try to ban, and in fact, seek out what they want banned, because usually those books have meaning. Those books have something of value to tell us about what they want banned, or how we should necessarily see the world, or a different perspective on seeing the world. If you have any recommendations for 2025, for January, or anything like that, or you simply want to comment on what I read in December, let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear from you and have a discussion, possibly. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about these books or my channel if they don't already know about it. And other than that, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and 2025 travels. Farewell.